Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and as always, I'm really excited to be here. And this is, I think, the third episode we're doing this week, if I'm not mistaken. And I've realized something really very valuable to me and important to me that I'd like to share with you, just as somebody who, we're having a thing here, right? We're communicating through this channel. And so I want you to know there was a question for me when I stopped doing the podcast last season, about a year ago. The question was like, what am I doing this for anymore? Right. I really was getting into the TikTok thing too. And I found that I was like constantly just attached to the idea of getting likes and, getting comments, and like two of my videos, I think it was two of them on TikTok, actually went viral. Like actually one had over 15,000 views or something like that. And that's a really exciting feeling in the body, right? And that exciting feeling is, quite frankly, is pretty addicting. And I think I was getting so attached to that. And as I tell you all, right, as soon as we're attached to something, even if it's something we love, right? And this is desire is this way too, right? When we desire something, the Buddhists would call this a subtle enemy, right? Because desire and attachment to something feels like, oh man, I want that. It's good. Give it to me. But that is, that attachment is only going to give way to negative emotions, right? Like fear. Like, what happens if I don't get all the likes? Oh my gosh, nobody liked my video. Now I'm in a state of, tension and sadness and stress and all kinds of negative emotions and negative conditions come out of that. And so I had to step away. I had to be like, wait a second, this is not what it's all about here. It's not good for me. It's not helping me. And it's not helping you for me to show up in that state, right? That's what the whole thing is about, is how are we showing up? And if I am showing up in this state of attachment, in this state of need, for these things, well, then that is not showing up in a way that is going to benefit you. If anything, I was, showing up to your detriment. So we took a long break and we came back. And what I've realized now over the last, couple of weeks now that I've been doing these again is that it feels really awesome to get up in the morning. Well, there's certain days where I can't do it, right? There's certain days where I have, appointments in the morning and I have, obligations. And so those are the days I'm not going to record a podcast. But on the days where I don't have anything going on in the morning, it is just blissful to be able to, wake up, do some journaling, have some breakfast, have a cup of tea, and then meet you all and do this. And I want to just tell you how refreshing and wonderful it feels. And there's no attachment, there's no clinging, there's no aversion, there's no delusion. It's just, it is what it is. I'm just here to start my day with you, okay? And so I just wanted to share that with you because it's just something that kind of occurred to me, I think, just a few days ago, and maybe last week or so. But it's a really important thing, and I just wanted to share that with you. Okay, I hope you don't mind. So today, I want to talk about not relationships. When I actually recently did a 6-week course in mindfulness and relationships called the Rising Hearts Love Academy, and I love that name. And I, even at the time though, I was billing it as and marketing it as, yes, this is for people in romantic relationships, but it could also apply to any relationships you have. Right? Because relationships require a certain level of skill. And this 6-week course, I taught such skills. And skills are things like empathy, kindness, active listening. What were the others? Empathy, kindness, active listening, compassion, I think was in there. It was only a few weeks ago, and I can't remember. Thank goodness I have everything recorded and written down, so I can certainly look it up for you if you need me to. So you just reach out to me if you want to know what the rest of those skills are, or if you want to purchase a recording of the course, I can do that for you too. But today, I wanted to refocus the idea of mindfulness and relationships, right? Because It's one thing to, when we think about relationships, right? It's something that we are in a mutual relating to someone, right? That's what a ship is, right? A fellowship or a sponsorship or a championship, right? Like a championship is two teams or two opponents playing in a championship. They are in this thing together. A relationship is two people who are in this thing together. They are relating to one another in a sort of with inside a common and linked sort of bond or boundary, if you will. All right. I don't know if I'm articulating that very clearly, because I think it's still formulating in my mind, right? But the important thing that I want to bring to this understanding, or the reason why I'm saying all this, is because it's not the ship part that's the important part, right? But that is the part that we mostly relate to, or relate to. That's the part that we mostly pay attention to, and we mostly, kind of look for, and kind of, like, every relationship is the result of this process. And now we're in a relationship, and now you're my friend, or you're my lover, or you're my whatever it is, right? However it is, we're defining this relationship. So maybe it's a relationship between a consultant and a client, right? Or a lawyer and a client, right? You're in a relationship with your client, right? And it's an established thing, right? But what I want to do today is I want to talk about what happens when we take away that word ship, right? And we don't think of it as this sort of, at least semi-formalized kind of thing that we're doing, but instead talk about relating, okay? Because the reality is that we are relating in every moment of our lives. Even when we're alone, right? There's almost always, it's going to occur to you, somebody else in your life, even as you're alone. Now, of course, these are usually the people with whom we are in a relationship with, even if it's an adversarial relationship, right? Like a lot of times when we're in a quiet moment, we have nothing going on, right? Our default mode network in our brain starts to kick in, and we start thinking about ourselves, but then we think about what's wrong in our lives and with ourselves, and then that is likely to cause us to think about our relationships with people with whom we don't agree and we don't, get along, and people we have conflict with, right? And this is what happens. I mean, how many times have you been like, doing the dishes, and you think about that person from the office and that argument you had, and you play it over in your mind again, right? I'm not the only one. I know I'm not the only one. But this is the thing, right? The reason why we do that, and this is very, very simple and specific and very well founded in modern neuroscience, is that the reason why we think of those people with whom we are in relationships, again, even if that's a negative and adversarial, enemyship, right? Not a friendship, but an enemyship, right? The reason we do that when nothing else is going on, or maybe we think of somebody we love, and maybe we think of somebody that's in a positive aspect of our relationship in our life, right? But the reason we do that is because as human beings, and let me pause there and say, as mammals, right, we are social creatures. We are wired to be social. Now, that doesn't mean social in terms of like, oh, we go out every Friday night and go dancing and, drink some cocktails and have a great time. Although that's part of it for sure, right? But what I mean is that we are constantly in a relational status, or let me say more specifically, it is when we are in a place of regulation and well-being and calm and sort of at our baseline, that we are always in a position to relate to others. We are in this mode. Dr. Stephen Porges, I'm looking at his book right here. He wrote the book The Polyvagal Theory, right? And this is renowned as like the stuff. Like, this is it, right? As far as we know now, right? And And he calls the what we know as the parasympathetic nervous system, right, which is the aspect of our nervous system when we are regulated, when we are in what we call the rest and digest phase, as opposed to the fight or flight phase, right? Rest, digest, reproduce. Even some people say, because you get in the mood, you know. But Stephen Porges calls this state of our nervous system the social engagement phase of our nervous system, or status of our nervous system, right? Social engagement, because that is what we are, just like other animals, just like all other animals, right? There's a really heartbreaking and horrific story that was done, or a story I can tell you of a lab experiment that was done many years ago with baby monkeys. They found that unfortunately they had to repeat this experiment over and over and over, but they found unequivocally that if if a baby monkey is born, and monkeys are very, very close to us in terms of their, genetics and their sort of structure and the brain development and everything else. And so it's very sort of intuitive to say that if it's happening to a baby monkey, it would happen to a baby human as well, right? Because they don't do this to humans. But what they did was they allowed monkeys to be born, and they took care of all of the monkeys' physical, or I shouldn't say all their physical needs, but all of their medical needs, let's say, right? They were kept warm, they were kept fed, they were kept hydrated, they were kept safe, right? But they were never picked up. And they were never held, and they were never touched, and they were never caressed. And the monkeys died. They didn't just get sick, they expired. They ceased to live. That's what I mean by being social creatures. We need, not it's just, oh, it's nice to have it, or it's good for us. No, we need the connection to others, right? Now, again, this is where it starts feeling like, okay, so I got to find some really close people in my life. I got to find some, a husband or a wife or a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a best friend or a BFF. I got to find them. But that's not the thing, right? Because, the monkey didn't care who it was that picked it up. Right? It didn't say, the lab experiment wasn't suggesting that only the monkey's mother could keep the monkey alive. No. And they did the experiment both ways, that if the nurse picked the monkey up or the lab technician picked the monkey up, the monkey lived, right? And so what I'm talking about here is our moment by moment experience. And in the way that is a constant invitation and a constant opening for relating. Not relationships, but relating. What do I mean by that? So, again, as I think I said this in the podcast the other day, that, when I was in my, stress, because stress is what takes us out of this social engagement phase, right? Stress is the sympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of the rest and digest, right? So stress is fight or flight. Right. And when we're in fight or flight, we are not in a place where we can socially engage with each other. Right. And so when I was wrapped up in my chronic stress and constant, I mean, it was 24/7, right? I would drink myself to sleep, and I would wake up and immediately be stressed and start drinking coffee, and just, it's just constant for me. Right. Except when I was drunk, right? And that's why I was an alcoholic, right? I was part of it anyway. But anyway, not to derail us on that. I can get into that another time. There's plenty to talk about there. but back then, right, I used to, as I said on the podcast the other day, I used to think my experience was, having my coffee in the morning and, doing my morning routine. And then I had a meeting at 10 a.m. and then I had a lunch date at 12:30, and then I had another appointment at 2, and then another thing at 5, and then I had to get my hair cut at 6. And so those were the experiences, those things I just named. But in between them was just nothing, right? It was just ether or something, right? It didn't matter. It didn't count because I wasn't doing anything. But I could not have been more wrong about that, right? That our experiences are not measured by what we see in our daily calendar on Outlook, right? Our experiences are not really measured in terms of the years or the months or the quarters or the weeks or the days or the hours or even the minutes, even the seconds. Our lives are measured in reality, not that everybody sees it this way, but in reality, our lives happen. Maybe I shouldn't say are measured because that's an act of the observer, right? So let's talk about the reality of what's actually happening, not what we perceive as happening. But what is happening is that our lives are lived moment by moment. And the reason I say that is because each one of these moments, there's a wonderful psychologist that I talk about a lot here named Barbara Friedrichsen, right? And she talks about micromoments, right? That's really what our lives are, is just this endless string, this endless connected, eternal fountain of micro moments. Not eternal, of course, but almost feels eternal sometimes. And what that means is that if we are present moment by moment, like always present, right? And of course, it doesn't mean that it's either win or lose, on or off. No. But the extent to which we are present always is the extent to which we can, experience these micro moments of our lives. And the micro moments almost always include, even when we're alone, as I said in the beginning here, but certainly if you count the moments of your life and you notice how many times you're exposed to another human being, these are the micro moments that we talk about. And it's not just the ones that, oh man, he's cute, I want to talk to him, right? It's the moments of, checking out of a supermarket. It's the moment of passing another customer in the aisle, and just it happens in a heartbeat. But in that heartbeat, we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to relate in that heartbeat, and it doesn't require, oftentimes, like I think of, like, oh man, I should have said this to that person, that would have made them laugh, But it's not about that either, right? It's just about eye contact and smiling and saying hello. And that's it. Like, it doesn't require anything more than that. And when I say it doesn't require any, what am I talking about? Like, what do you mean, Art? Like, what am I trying to do here? What's required? I didn't know there were requirements. What? Nothing is required. But when I say that that's all that is required, what I mean is that that's all it takes in order to imbue your own experience with a sense of connection. That's all it takes to feel that connection. Just looking someone in the eye, smiling, and saying hello, right? Looking at the cashier and saying, hey, thank you for your help. I hope you have a great rest of your day. But really meaning it, not just, one of my pet peeves of my life is the hi, how are you? I used to do that all the time. In fact, I used to say it in such a way that somebody used to say, Hawaii, it's an island in the Pacific. But when we do that, that's the opposite of connection, right? When we say, hi, how are you? We're not really asking how you are, right? I'm not asking, I don't really want to know. It's just a formality, right? An empty and mindless and disconnected formality. So I don't say that ever anymore. I never, ever, ever say, hi, how are you? Or if I do, it's a mistake. What I say is, hi, it's nice to see you. Or it's great to see you. Or you look well. Or gosh, it's great to be here with you. And what I get back from people, it's amazing. And again, there's no ulterior motives here. I'm not doing it to get a response, because that also is not relating, right? That is attachment. If we're saying something in order to get a certain response from somebody, that is manipulation in a sense, right? That's the opposite of what I'm talking about here, or something of the other than what I'm talking about here. But what I'm talking about is the ability for us to tune into this thing that is happening, right? We know scientifically that we are constantly in even before Stephen Porges told us about this, the social engagement aspect of our parasympathetic nervous system, we have always known, or for decades, we have known that, like, if you and I were to be in a conversation with each other, for instance, right, as we're sitting there and somebody was videotaping us, they would see that our gestures start to mimic each other. If I do this, you do that. If I do this, you do that. And it's amazing to watch this. We've known forever that our facial expressions are constantly mimicking each other. Edgar Allan Poe said that if I want to know what's going on in somebody's mind, what I need to do is try to imitate their facial expression and then notice how I feel. That's 100 years ago, right? We know about mirror neurons, which are constantly at play. I mean, certainly when we're young, we have more mirror neurons than we have other neurons in our brains. But even now as adults, we have a significant amount of mirror neurons, which are imitating each other, not imitating, but feeling each other. I feel your experience. If I were to be hammering a nail into a board and I miss and I hit my thumb and you're standing there watching, you not only, it's not just a thing of you being nice and kind to say, oh, that looks like it hurt. No, your mirror neurons in your brain give you a flash of the feeling that I had. That's why we wince. That's a neural experience, a neurological response. We also know about the vagus nerve and how the vagus nerve is constantly in resonance with what's going on. This is more into Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory. But what we have found is that as we're speaking to each other, our heart rates will sync up with each other. Our respiration will start to sync up with each other. And again, this is not just, only if you've been with somebody for 20 years, right? Or only if they know your secrets, no, this is with somebody you're sitting on next to the bus, sitting next to on the bus. This is somebody who you're talking to as a cashier during a simple transaction. This is the bank teller. This is the person behind you online for whatever it is that you're going for. This is the person just randomly, wherever, everywhere, and anywhere. And so the point that I'm making is that we have this almost endless opportunity, this endless source of opportunities to feel into this and to experience this way that our bodies are designed to work. So in other words, when we are socially engaged and socially connected to each other, what we're doing is we're experiencing the well-being of our body. And what's more important than that? There's nothing more important than that. That's your health. That's your well-being. That's your longevity. That's everything that you want comes from there. And the way in which we can be present for every one of these micro moments is through mindfulness and kindness and compassion practices. Because this is what allows us to, and look, it's not about being perfect, right? It's never about being perfect. Do I find myself sometimes like lost in my thoughts as I'm sitting there on the supermarket line? Absolutely. Absolutely. But the difference now compared to what it used to be is that now I see it. I recognize it. I say, oh, look at me. I'm not present here. And then as soon as I notice it, as soon as I recognize it, guess what? I'm present again. And now I'm back into this social engagement or not necessarily. If I'm really stressed, it takes more than just an instant. But the point is that we can constantly be working back towards this place of social engagement, right? And so when we practice mindfulness, right, it allows us, it's all about paying attention right now, right? And doing so with a certain level of care and kindness. And this opens us up to the compassion so that when we see somebody, and this is how it works in the 360-degree way, right? Like it's, some of you might be thinking like, oh yeah, sure, but what happens when somebody's a jerk? Well, yeah, you're right. They are jerks sometimes. But what we recognize when we are really socially engaged in this way and we practice this and we develop this as a skill, what we recognize is that the reason that person's being a jerk is because of a pain, because of a difficulty they're experiencing, because they are not in their social engagement status of their nervous system. They are suffering right now. They are feeling stress. They are feeling some overwhelming emotion. Does that mean that it's okay that they're a jerk to me? No, not really. But it means I can forgive it a little bit, and not for their benefit, not to tell them, oh, it's okay, you're a jerk. You can, come on, just be a jerk to me. No. I can set a boundary, and I can choose to not expose myself to that person until they are in their place of social engagement and calm down and everything. And I can make that choice from mindfulness. But the problem is, right, when I don't think of it this way, when I don't experience it this way, then when that person's a jerk, well, I'm going to meet them with my jerkiness. Look at this. I'm going to get back at them. And then we're in a place of no longer are we in a place of social engagement, right? Now we are feeling stress. Now we are in that sympathetic nervous system where we are cut off from the ability. So in that moment, if I'm in that state, my mirror neurons aren't working. My gestures are not going to link up. My facial expressions are not going to sync up. My vagus nerve is not going to, link up the heart rate and all that stuff. None of that stuff is actually going to happen in that moment, because I'm cut off from it in my stress response. Okay? So that is the benefit of being able to meet even the most jerky jerks out there, to meet them with kindness and with compassion and with, as Dan Siegel calls it, a universal positive regard, right? That, yeah, you're being a jerk to me, but I hope you feel better, Because it does me no good to be a jerk back to you. Not only does it do me no good, but again, and of course, it's not just like, yeah, we're not going to, I didn't have that going with you anyway. There's no way that you and I are going to get into this synchronized and a connected way, because of your status, right? But the problem with that, and the thing is that it's not just about this one person, right? Because now, okay, let's say we have a 3-minute interaction with this person who's a jerk, right? And we let ourselves get mean and meet them with our own meanness and stuff like that. Okay, now that encounter's over. Now what? Now for at least the next 20 minutes or so, you're in that state of hyperarousal in the sympathetic nervous system, in the stress state. So your creativity is not happening. Your logic is not happening. Your ability to relate is not happening. So now how many circumstances, how many opportunities are just going to pass by in which you could have been contributing to your well-being, but instead are contributing to your unwell-being? And that's why this is so important. So if you want to learn about some of these practices, I am here to teach you. Okay? I'm here to teach you. It's so simple. These practices are ridiculously simple. They really are. All it requires is a little bit of commitment, a little bit of motivation, and just a simple, repetition. That's all it requires. It's not magical. It's not mystical. It's not, mysterious in any way. It is simple. It is straightforward. And, while I stop short of saying it's easy, because for a lot of people it's not, right? And it's not easy because it's not because the work is not easy. It's not easy because of the habits that we already have, right? I always tell people that you're not just starting practice. You're starting this practice right now, but you've been practicing something your whole life. You've been practicing, being in that state of hyperarousal, of being, in a state of non-connection. It's not your fault. In all likelihood, for most of us, it's what we were taught, right? We're mimicking what our parents did, right? In a very simple way, or our caregivers, whoever they were. And it's also something that we inherit, from our grandparents and ancestry. When we're born, I'll go real quick into this, but there's a couple of fascinating, I'm going to save this for another one, but just assume, I'm going to make a note of this. I'll give you a real quick idea, just one example, right? When your grandmother was pregnant with your mother at 4 months of pregnancy, the single cell that was the ovum that became you was already in your grandmother's body. And at that time, whatever it is that your grandmother experienced in terms of her stress and her cortisol and her adrenaline and her ability, and these are the things that stop us from connection, right? You experienced that too, and your development followed a trajectory of that. Okay, so there's other examples I'm going to give you in the next episode. All right, so it's not your fault that you have trouble in this way. It's not, and it's not something that we need to blame you, and we don't need to blame your grandmother either, because it wasn't her fault either, right? Because she was subject to the same, same hereditary system and apparatus that you were. Okay. And so it's important to recognize that it's not your fault. It's not their fault. It's nobody's fault. There's no reasonable way that we could even assign blame, even if it was possible, even if it was legitimate to do so. It's impossible to do it. So it's about starting right now. What can you do to become more relatable? To put yourself in the position to experience these micro moments and feed your heart and feed your energy through these micro experiences, through the social engagement of these micro experiences. So if you want help with it, let me know. Okay, I'm here. It's not as expensive as you might think, and it's not as difficult as you might think. I promise you. And with the right coaching, which I happen to be really good at it, you can, it can happen to even, look, I have people who, when I met them, they were the kind of people who would literally get into shouting matches every time they went to the supermarket. And now they are like bodhisattvas, like seriously, they are walking the earth in peace and happiness. And that's not an overstatement. There's 2 people I could tell you that are exactly like that. And then there's many more that are not quite as extreme, but I mean, it's the point is that anybody, okay, even the most cold and curmudgeonly heart can be softened through these practices. Because that's the thing, this is how we're supposed to be. So the minute we start doing this, our body responds in such a beautiful way, and it becomes a positive feedback loop. All right, I'm going to stop there, and we'll talk to you next time. All right, I wish you all well. I hope it's like the first spring weekend here. There's 80 degrees in the Northeast. There's snow out here in Colorado, which is perfect, Colorado spring weather. and yeah, I mean, I just hope that you enjoy it. I hope that you're able to live it with presence and with connection to yourself and to everyone else, because that's really what it is connecting to ourselves so that we can connect to everyone else. All right. And that's what these practices do. All right, everybody. Wish you well. Hope you have a great day, great weekend. And I'll be back again one day next week, or maybe 3 days next week. We'll see you later.